Hi everyone, it's Elise from Kit and Clouder, and in this video tutorial today I'm going to be taking you through some blending effects. We're going to be focusing on two-tone blending here today, and I'm going to show you two different techniques. Firstly, we're going to be going through how to blend one colour into another colour, and then also one colour blend into another colour blend. So you can see both of these techniques can actually be really helpful with your colouring to create some different effects. We've shown you here how to just do a really simple two-tone blend, so that might be really useful for small images or just adding in another colour for a bit more depth and excitement. But this one here utilises our light source to show that highlight, midtone and shadow, and you can see how much more depth and attention to detail this one really has. But both have their place and both are really important when you're learning about colouring. You should have your exercise sheet already printed out ready to go. I'm going to be using a series of purple and blue markers here today, but if you don't have these markers, please feel free to use any you have in your stash. Just make sure that you're utilising that highlight, midtone and shadow that we went through in the previous video tutorials. The first one that we're going to be doing is one marker into another. Now I'm going to be using V15 and B14 for this step. When you do two markers blending into one, it's important that they're roughly the same value. So what that means is they're about the same darkness of colour. So they're both mid-tone colours there, so they're both roughly around the same shade. If we're using a lighter colour, say V12, we want to use a lighter blue, so we'd use, say, the B12. Both highlight markers, both going to blend better together. If we were to use, say, V15 and B12, the V15 would be quite dark against the B12, so it would be harder to get that smoother transition. Okay, so we've got my markers here ready to go. So V15 and B14, and we're just going to use that feathered stroke that we used previously. So remembering that one, we want to come across the page and just lift up as we exit the stroke. So I'm starting here with my V15. The outline of the butterfly is quite jagged, so I'm kind of just tracing around that first to make sure I can fill that really nicely. And you can see I'm just lifting the marker as I exit the stroke, getting that nice smooth finish along the edge. You'll notice that I'm doing my strokes quite quickly as well. Like I mentioned earlier in a previous video, you typically get a softer finish when you work faster, and we tend to not press down as hard, which is very important. You only need a very, very light touch when you blend with your alcohol markers. Now I'm going to move into my B14, and I'm going to start in this other direction here. Extending up and toward the purple, and now what I'm going to do is actually extend over the top of where the purple finishes. So we're overlapping that colour. I'm back in the opposite direction now, and I'm going to go over my purple again and focus on coming back and over where that blue has ended. So we're working on blending out that transition between the colours. And we basically just work back and forward until we get the blend nice and smooth. And that's really all there is to two-tone blending. It's just making sure that you overlap the colours as they finish, rather than starting one where another stops. You can encourage the transition to be a little smoother by using a slightly softer marker. So this is my B12 here, and I'm just coming through and extending this up and into the purple areas. And that's just going to take any last edge off there. You can see we've got a really beautiful and smooth transition. Now I'm going to show you the other side, and I'm going to do a whole colour blend into another whole colour blend, and that way we can compare the two different wings. starting with my purples again, but I'm going to start with my V17, which is a shadow color. So this is how we would normally do our shading here. Come down and around the entire wing, and then you can just feather that in toward the middle a short way. Now when you use a lot of colors, it's important to make sure you aren't extending any one color too far. We want to use all the colors about equally. V15 is next, and you're going to be applying multiple strokes over where the previous color has ended, softening out that line between them. Once you get it nice and soft, you can then extend this color further down and toward the middle of the butterfly. So you can see, taking my time and layering this up. V12 is my last color here, so this is my lightest. I'm blending this one out, getting that nice and smooth, and then extending further down. So in this purple blend, we've got now a nice contrast between highlight, midtone, and shadow. Now working from our opposite direction, we're going to start with B16, which is our darkest marker here. And then I'm extending up toward the middle of the butterfly where that purple is. B14 is next, and it's the same thing. Extending up and toward that middle. And then my B12. Again, extending up and toward the middle, multiple strokes, blending everything out nice and smooth. And just like we did previously, we now need to overlap to get everything smooth. So now my V12, coming back from the purple side, overlapping that B12 in the blue. Just going to turn my image slightly on the side. I do find it a lot easier to do my strokes on the side. So that way I'm working away from myself. You can come back with your B12 in this opposite direction, overlapping where that purple ends. And keep just working them until you're happy with the transition. So you can see we've got a lot more contrast on this side now, which is really nice. It shows highlight, midtone, and shadow. I'm going to add in just a little bit more of my deepest color, and that's just because I feel like my lightest color, so many layers of it, has desaturated that shadow just a tiny bit. So I'm just popping in there again, V17, V15 now. That's just given me a little bit more depth. So when we do this sort of a shading, you can see what I've talked about. I've used the word called contrast. So contrast is the difference between a lighter marker and a darker marker. So it's showing the depth and contrast between light and shade. And that's really making those areas stand out. It's what makes the shadows stand out, and what makes things look like they've got a lot of depth, to show the really bright and light colors of the highlights versus the very dark and deep colors of the shadows. It makes the distance between objects really prominent and creates more of that 3D realistic look. So that's what this side now has, as opposed to what we achieved on the left here. We've got a lot more depth of color happening. To finish off, I'm just going to grab my W9, and you can add this through the middle of the butterfly. There. You can go ahead and do the bottom the same as we did up in the top two areas as well. Like to see, have a go at that yourself just to see how this translates through. And then experiment with different colours. You can see that I've tried purples into blues. Typically colours that are closer on the colour wheel are going to go together easier. For example, reds into oranges, greens and yellows together. But you can try and mix and match them on a broader spectrum. So we could try purples into reds or something like that. The easiest way to get a smooth transition is to bring that transition colour there between the blends right down to the very lightest colours. So highlights ending, say, in the zeros are going to give you the smoothest result. So you can start all the way in your shadow areas up at the 9s. So you could go 9, 5, 3, 0 is in the middle. Same here, 9, 5, 3, 0 is in the middle. Make sure those zeros meet each other for a really smooth finish. So I'm really excited to see how you all go with this one. Experiment. It doesn't need to be perfect, but we're playing with colour. That's the whole point of this class, is just to start playing and experimenting so that when you get to your final images or your colouring work, you can use some of these techniques to take your colouring to that next level. Areas where you could use this could be, say, in a dress. You may do all of your folds in one colour and the bottom half of the dress may be another colour. Or they may all just be just in the purple and just a simple blend between the two. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.